In this presentation on Kevin Parker and Tame Impala, I will first talk about Kevin Parker's life, then I'll talk about his career, and finally I will talk about Tame Impala's change in music style from their first album, Inner Speaker, and their second album, Lunarism. Now I'll talk about Kevin Parker's life. He was born in Sydney, Australia in 1986. His parents were Jerry and Rosalind Parker. And growing up, Kevin's dad, Jerry, played in cover bands that would often cover Beatles songs and the Beach Boys, and this really influenced Kevin's music taste growing up. At age 7, Parker started playing songs of his own and writing his own music, and at age 12 he recorded his first song with his dad's equipment in his dad's garage. And eventually, when he was 15, Parker and his best friend, Dom Simper, began to play in various small bands around their hometown. And eventually, years after that, Parker and Dom made their own band called the DD Doms. And Parker eventually renamed the band to Tame Impala. And shortly after this, a record label named Modular signed Kevin Parker after he had posted a few songs online and they liked his work and they wanted to make a song with him. And shortly after that, Tame Impala released their first album, Inner Speaker, in 2010 without any producer's help. Kevin Parker wanted it to be his own original project. So now I'll talk about Kevin Parker's career a little bit. So after Tame Impala's first album, Inner Speaker, dropped in 2010, it was only really popular amongst the indie crowd, and it wasn't until their second album, Lunarism, dropped that they became more popular. And since Inner Speaker dropped, they've released 3 more albums, with their newest, The Slow Rush, having been dropped earlier this year in February. And now they've become so popular they now play at venues like Coachella. And recently in 2019, Kevin Parker worked with Travis Scott to produce a song called Skeletons on his new album, Astroworld. So it's cool to see that Kevin Parker has grown from a small guy in Australia who made music for fun to this huge artist who now works alongside huge rappers. So now I'll talk about Tame Impala's change in music style from Inner Speaker to Lunarism. So when Tame Impala recorded their first album, Inner Speaker, Kevin Parker and Dom did it in a beach house in the middle of nowhere, and they did it over 6 weeks. And it was kind of like a heartfelt project for Kevin Parker because one of the songs on the album, called Jeremy's Storm, was named after his father, who passed away from cancer that same year. And Wikipedia defines Tame Impala's genre as being kind of like a psychedelic pop or a psychedelic rap. But Kevin Parker says Inner Speaker is more of a dream pop genre, and it has a big influence from the Beatles, and it also sounds like a modern version of the Beatles. To show the relation between the Beatles and this album in terms of the vocals, I'll play first Expectation. Now I'll play Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. So when you listen closely and compare the vocals from both those songs, you can really hear how the Beatles influenced Kevin Parker growing up and how that influence came out in his first album. When he was making his first album, Inner Speaker, Kevin said he was a little bit shy and he was afraid to kind of show his true colors in his music. And after they started to make Lonerism, Parker wanted to explore sounds, and he says this album has a combination of both fucked up sounds and pop melodies. And he actually bought a vintage synthesizer to use to make some of the sounds. And to show these new sounds, I'm going to play Why Won't They Talk to Me from Lonerism. So Kevin Parker also included some improv in this album, and I'm going to play part of Sun's Coming Up to show that. So that continues in the song for a couple minutes, and it reminds me of improv that the Warlocks did during the acid tests in the early 60s. So out of Tame Impala's first two albums, I think that Lonerism is true to Kevin Parker's sound, because in Lonerism he was confident enough to explore new things such as the synthesizer, and he even included the improv that is similar to early psychedelic rock.